Hi, my name is Robert DeLaurentis, and I graduated with my master's in spiritual psychology in 2012, and then came back in 2014 for an emphasis in consciousness, health, and healing. And when I came to my first information evening a little over 4 years ago, I came specifically because I wanted more in my life. I wanted more abundance. I wanted more happiness. I wanted a greater connection with spirit, and I wanted those questions that Ron mentioned answered as well. Who was I? What was my purpose? And for me, what was I going to do next? The problem was, at the time in my life, I was experiencing personal and professional logjam, roadblock, call it what you must. And I was out of bandwidth. I was maxed out. There weren't enough hours in the day to get done what I was trying to get done. I was frustrated. I was scared. And quite honestly, I just didn't know what to do. That internal turmoil was manifesting in my life as well as a landlord. I was bogged down by lawsuits, by evictions. The turnover rate in my units was very high. I was struggling to keep my workers with the company. And the frustration built to the point where I was angry, and I was getting a reputation around San Diego as being very difficult to do business with. And there were some people who didn't like me. And it was a hard pill to swallow, it really was. So the first thing I learned at USM was it wasn't God, it wasn't the world, and it certainly wasn't my parents that were to blame for any of that. It was actually me manifesting that in my world. And Ron, I believe, mentioned that USM has an expression to describe it. It's that your outer experience is a reflection of your inner reality. And I found that so true. So to change my world, I'd first have to change me. And USM turns out to be the perfect place to do that because you're surrounded by hundreds of loving souls. They're supporting you, they're loving you, they're encouraging you, they're fighting for you, and they're loving you with their hearts totally open. And I was running a little bit scared, and I needed a place like this, and USM was that place. So as I started to learn the principles and practices of spiritual psychology, I started to notice an instant change in my world, mostly my business, quite honestly. And one of the skills that I learned that first weekend was listening. And the funny thing was, I didn't think I'd ever truly listened to a person before. It sounds totally insane, but it was true because I was always a mile behind them or a mile ahead of them. I was trying to anticipate what they were going to say, and then in my mind formulating my response. But sometimes they didn't say what I expected, and then we were even further apart. What I found is once I could actually have authentic communication with somebody, especially my tenants and my contractors and my investors, then all of a sudden the lawsuits and evictions that I was dealing with to the tune of about $2,000 to $3,000 a month just started to drop off. And people weren't as angry, and I wasn't as angry. And eventually it came almost to a complete stop. And it felt great because I wasn't carrying around all that anger. People weren't upset with me, and they weren't carrying through that anger to different parts of my business. So it was a wonderful experience, and it was funny because about 2 months after I was actively listening, I came across my eviction attorney, and he asked me if I was out of the business. And I said, no, we're just doing business differently. So I guess he didn't get his vacation that year. But the second thing that was transformative that happened while I was at USM was how I was handling investors. And in the past, as the market started to tighten up, and I needed to look other places for resources, I was asking people to invest, but I wasn't having much luck. And then one day in class, we were doing a meditation, and I got an intuition hit or a download, and it was very, very clear. It said, stop asking people for money, share your wins, share your passion, and tell them what you can do for them. Well, the very next time I tried that, which was about 2 weeks later, I was out to dinner with one of my buddies, and I was just excited. I was sharing everything that was going on in the business, and he said, I want to invest with you. And the first thing I thought is, boy, that spiritual psychology really works. And so then I said, well, how much are you thinking? And he said, I'm thinking about 150,000 to start. And my first thought was I wanted to do a fist pump and just stand up and yell, yes. But I said, well, let me think about that and I'll get back to you. And what happened is I started to understand what abundance was and how to work with investors and do what I could for them, is the money started to roll in. And it was kind of like a tidal wave, one after another. And as of the other day, I had about $7 million in holding that was ready to invest. So it was a dramatic change. So the changes I saw in my business, I went from 100 units to 300 units by the time the spiritual journey, well, as of today, from the very beginning. And the amount of time that I was spending in the business went from a full day to an hour a day. And then as this abundance of time and resources started to overflow into my personal life, then I had an opportunity to start to realize some of my childhood dreams. Spirit had more plans for me, and as long as I was open to those opportunities and I had the tools that I learned here at USM, then I found they started to manifest in my life. So it's been fantastic. And for those of you that have come here wanting more, I really believe this is the place. I encourage you to continue on your journey, and I wish you light ahead.